Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Friday evening to you all. Hope everyone is doing well out there tonight and had yourselves a fantastic day. And I hope everyone has been having a great start to their weekend out there so far. Of course, it's pretty active right now across areas of the Southern Plains, Texas. Once again, is having some wacky weather out there, some dangerous weather we already had. Confirmed tornadoes in west central Texas. We've already had one wacky storm doing some crazy things, kind of similar to what happened in southern Oklahoma a couple nights ago. And it's getting to the point where I'm getting all the days mixed up. We've been dealing with this really active weather for 7 days straight now, dating back to last Friday when we had the tornado outbreak in Nebraska and areas of Iowa. And then we know what happened into Saturday. I think it was last Saturday in Oklahoma. I'm just getting them all mixed up. It's just been incredibly active. And things are just not going to slow down. And that's what we're here to talk about. And what we'll do first is we'll discuss what potentially could happen tomorrow, as we do have a threat of strong tornadoes. And then we'll speak a little bit on Sunday, but the meat of this video is going to be into discussing what potentially could happen Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, even into Thursday and Friday of next week. We're going to talk about the evolution of the pattern, what's really driving a multi-day severe weather risk. And when I say multi-day, I seriously think that this thing could last from Monday to Friday of next week, and each and every day of the work week next week could run the risk of significant severe weather. It gets kind of fuzzy when you get into Thursday and Friday, but I even think those days will have the chance here, maybe all the way into next weekend. But I do think a cold front will stabilize the atmosphere for most of everyone next weekend, but we don't know the details on that yet. So we're going to break it all down. We're not going to talk about what's going on right now. There's a lot of people going live that I'm sure a lot of people are tuning into the Storm Chasers, Ryan Hall, the people showing you live radars and just keeping you guys aware, doing awesome things, saving people's lives. But of course, on this channel, we like to keep you guys aware, basically aware of what's going to happen here in the short term, medium term, and long term future of the weather in general and how it could potentially impact your general area. So that's what we're going to do. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. Take advantage of those timestamps, guys. They're there to help you folks. We'll have everything sectioned out very well in this video. And more importantly, if you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put those in the comments below. I know a lot of people suffer from storm anxiety, and all this crazy weather is doing nothing but just aggravating that even more, and I totally get it. Trust me. So I'm praying for all you folks and anybody else that has any kind of prayer request out there. So let's get rocking and rolling. So we're going to start off by looking at the water vapor loop. All right, we can really show you what's going on right now. We're going to talk about 3 different things on this. Okay, and you might be looking at this saying, Mitch, I don't know what I'm looking at. Well, let's make sure this is working first. The duller colors, like right into here, indicates more drier air out there. That doesn't necessarily mean it's like bone dry air, but just more dry air, not a lot of moisture in the atmosphere, not a lot of storm activity, if any at all those things. Where you see more wider colors, this indicates more moisture in the atmosphere. It could be higher humidity, could be showers and storms, could just be widespread rain. In some cases in the winter, it could be snow, could be all kinds of forms of precipitation. Okay, so now that you know that, obviously your eyes are probably going to Texas, Oklahoma, and then Kansas, all the way up to Nebraska, where all of a sudden an explosion of white shows up on your screen, especially in Texas. Guys, those are the explosive thunderstorms that got going a couple hours ago in Texas that are still ongoing right now. We still have severe warned and tornado warned storms right at this moment. So you see how these storms basically virtually explode out of nowhere? Well, basically when one updraft gets going, when one storm gets going, it basically causes a chain reaction and a lot of storms can get going. As soon as that updraft can tap into all the energy in the atmosphere, the cape, the storm fuel, then it's just game on at that point. That's exactly what happened. And the HRRR model actually handled this very well. Okay, so this is what's going on right now. Okay, moisture over here, not a big deal. Well, this is, but not so much this. Then you see this area right here surging into the Pacific Northwest. This is our upper trough that's going to dive down here. By the time we look at this, maybe tomorrow morning, this area in white that you see showing up here in the corner of your screen, this will probably be more so right into here. And that is our big system that's going to promote a several-day severe weather risk coming up next week. Okay, so let's go on and get this back off, and let's finally just move past this. Now, let's focus in on tomorrow's severe weather risk for your Saturday. What is it? May the 4th. Okay, may the 4th be with you, Star Wars. Anyways, but you got a enhanced risk down here for southwestern Texas, western areas of Texas. A slight risk surrounds it. This slight risk does include areas of southeastern New Mexico all the way into central Texas. And you even do have that enhanced risk for a very small corner of southeastern New Mexico. Marginal risk extends all the way up here to Chicago, all the way down to San Antonio and Austin, all the way to the Mexico-U.S. line. So what is this driven off of? Let's just go on and take a closer look at Texas. There it is, Midland. Right in the middle of this, of course, there's a lot of other small towns and communities that's not being shown up on this. I really wish they showed more. That would be awesome. Lubbock, Abilene, San Angelo, Fort Stockton all have that slight risk. Marginal risk, a level 1 out of 5. Dallas, Fort Worth, Childress, Wichita Falls, all the way down to San Antonio, Austin, Waco, all the way to Texarkana. Okay, what is this driven off of? Well, I'll tell you right off the dot. We have, well, let's go on and show this since I'm wanting to jump to this. Well, this is Friday's outlook, so let's get it together, Mitch. Here we go. All right, so the tornado outlook for tomorrow, May the 4th. You see this very small yellow area? That is a 10% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in a given location. You see the black outline region with the black dashes going in between it? That means there's also a 10% risk of a strong tornado, EF2 or stronger. Okay, in the brown area, 5% risk. In the green area, that's the 2% risk of a tornado. So guys, I want to compare something and take a minute to discuss this. The last 2 days in Texas, including today and yesterday, there's only been a 5% risk of a tornado. And we've had multiple tornadoes. We've had large tornadoes this evening and yesterday. That was only a 5%, so they just weren't as confident, but it happened. Tomorrow is a 10% risk. And I'm going to show you what the H-R model is showing for this. And we're going to have multiple supercells in this area of Texas. So it's going to be another evening tomorrow where we're going to have multiple tornadoes on the ground. So if you're in a small town, just out here between small towns, just out here in the, I guess, country areas of Texas, please take this serious. Your friends right up the road are experiencing some nasty weather. It'll be your turn a little bit further southwest tomorrow. This is the wind threat. This could increase. Tomorrow, you have a 15% risk in the yellow area of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. Okay? The hail threat for tomorrow is also driving the enhanced risk. Yellow area, 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. In the red area, which I know is pretty small, but still, it's there. Red area, 30% chance of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger. And of course, you have the black outline region, which means there's a chance of significant severe weather. In this case, it being hail, so there's a 10% risk if you live in this black outline region of hail exceeding 2 inch in diameter or larger. Tomorrow is just going to be just as significant for areas of Texas as the last 2 days, including tonight. Okay, so let's take a look what the H-R model is showing for Texas. And we're really just going to focus in on Texas. Tomorrow when we wake up, we'll break down the rest of the marginal risk area like we do for our morning forecast every single day. So starting off around 1 p.m. tomorrow. And I know it says 2 p.m. right here, but back this up 1 hour because this is an Eastern time and I can't change it. I know I say that every single time for my regulars, but just want to reiterate that for any new people tuning in. So this is 1 p.m. Not a whole lot going on. Some spotty showers kind of around the Lubbock area down to Abilene. But then we continue to move forward. All right, we start to get to 3 p.m. Immediately, storms get going. And immediately, they take on a supercell-like structure. I mean, this is 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m. All of a sudden, supercell capable of producing a tornado south and southwest of Childress. Lubbock, you got a storm that forms right on top of you. We don't know if this is exactly where these storms will form. They could extend this. I could see them extending this 10% risk of a tornado a little bit further up here. It kind of blows my mind. Now, I will tell you, there's a cold front. A cold front is really driving this setup. This could really create any kind of storms that's around Lubbock points north, a little bit more elevated. But I'm actually kind of surprised. We got to watch the progression of the cold front. You can actually see it on Water Vapor Loop. If you look right here, you can see some movement in eastern Colorado. This will sag all the way down into the panhandle of Texas. And we just got to see where it stalls out. Okay, but if you go back and look at this, look at these storms. They already are taking on that kidney bean structure. But it's really the further south you get and the more supercells you get, that's where you're going to have the better chance for tornadoes. The energy will really be building right into here. Not so much up into here, but down here. Wherever the boundary is, where this cape is stopping, there's going to be basically literally a surface boundary where a cold front is separating drier, more stable air and extremely unstable air in western Texas. But look at all these supercells that have that hook to it, that kidney bean look, that structure that favors a supercell, which is a rotating thunderstorm. All these storms in here are capable of producing all hazards. What is interesting on this particular run of the HRRR model, it doesn't really show those supercells down here where they do have that 10% risk area. So remember, HRRR model, short range model, guys, isn't always exact science. Okay, it's not the exact conclusion. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. But all of a sudden, these storms kind of congeal together around 7 p.m. I think these storms will fire up kind of around the same time as they did this afternoon in Texas. I really do. And then these storms will kind of group together. I think the tornado threat will lessen once this happens. And then you'll just have another round of storms sweeping across areas of northern Texas, southern Oklahoma, only just aggravating the already saturated grounds even more overnight tomorrow night. And this will happen tonight also. Okay, so just looking back at these again, I mean, look at these structures, these storms. So this is around 5 p.m. tomorrow. Supercells showing up on this run between, south of Lubbock all the way down to, almost Odessa. But I figure there's probably going to be some supercells down here also. Odessa's right in the middle of that 10% risk of a strong tornado. And of course, this is the updraft velocity swap. This indicates rotation with these storms. Just because there's rotation, that doesn't mean there's going to be a tornado. So this is starting off tomorrow morning. If you notice, you already have areas right here on your screen. This is for the storms that are ongoing right now into the overnight hours. So ignore these areas. And I know there's a lot of counties in western Texas that look exactly the same. All are squares and things like that. So I hope you know which county's yours if you're tuning in from this area. That definitely will help. But always remember that these models aren't going to be your exact conclusion. We're just trying to get a good idea. But watch as we start to move into about midday. Watch what happens right into here. As we continue to move, look at those highlighted areas that just fire up out of everywhere right into here. Okay, vibrant pink colors. I mean, this is some of the most highlighted areas I've ever seen on the updraft velocity swath, indicating rotation with these storms. And it's wild. It's actually kind of north of the 10% risk area. That's why I'm wondering if they're going to shift it a little bit further north or either just make it larger. But, man, no doubt there's going to be some tornadoes. Even in southeastern New Mexico, guys, there's going to be some tornadoes. Most likely, at least one or two. But right here in west central Texas, I mean, this area, pretty much right into here is going to run that risk. Maybe not that far north. I would cut it off right in here. But down here, oof, very large hail, tornadoes is a possibility. And you can see what happens with this fuel, with the CAPE, the energy in the atmosphere. It's already building into place. I mean, already tomorrow morning, you got CAPE values, mixed layer CAPE, already reaching 1,500 to 2,000 joules per kilogram. The atmosphere is already getting prime, right? And then we start to get into about mid-morning. Notice, I want you to notice this. Watch how this area begins to collapse. You go from like over 1,500 joules per kilogram to like zero CAPE. In some of these areas in the counties of the Panhandle of Texas. Watch this. That is because a cold front is sinking down, stabilizing the atmosphere. So what I'm wondering is, what is going to be the timing of this cold front? Okay, if these counties right into here, this will be huge. So this is around, I don't know, like tomorrow early afternoon. You go from like no storm fuel up here, no CAPE up here in Amarillo to, rocket fuel down here in like south of Lubbock into Odessa. And of course, prime heating of the day, 1920Z Zulu time. That's tomorrow afternoon in West Texas. You got plenty of storm fuel in the atmosphere. CAPE values well over 2,500 joules per kilogram. Probably going to be more than this. Probably going to spike to even over 3,000 joules per kilogram mixed layer CAPE. So plenty of fuel in the atmosphere, guys. So please be aware of this in Texas tomorrow. Some nasty storms. Then we get into Sunday. I think Sunday will be somewhat of a rest period, a rest day. But you are still going to run a large area that's going to at least run the chance of some thunderstorms. I mean, literally from like the northern Rockies all the way to the East Coast. And then you got to watch for a little bit of flow. A lot of moist air, but not a whole lot of flow. A little bit down here as this upper trough that we're about to talk heavily on is starting to dig down into the western U.S. There'll be just enough flow ahead of this to promote some stronger to maybe severe storms in this area. We'll have to watch to see if this upgrades to a slight risk, especially further west in this marginal area. So, there is a risk of severe weather for Sunday. But it's then as we start to get into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and even though there's no outlook up really for Thursday and Friday, I think there eventually will be. But check this out. Enhanced risk at day 4. Already for, the heart of Kansas, southern sections of Nebraska, and northern sections of Oklahoma. Slight risk extends from northern sections of Texas all the way up through the entire eastern section, just about of Nebraska, including very small sections of Iowa and Missouri. This is day 5. All right, stretches into the areas of the Midwest, down the Mississippi Valley, all the way down to the Texarkana region. This means there's a level 2 out of 5 risk of severe weather. A slight risk, basically, a level 5. Okay, 15% risk of severe weather. Day 6, this kind of shifts to the southwest as basically this upper trough becomes zonal, provides more stable air up into here, but not down here. Plenty of flow riding over a very rich, moist atmosphere. So you do run the chance of severe weather also for Wednesday. And even though Thursday doesn't show up, it says predictability too low for Thursday, predictability too low for Friday, there is going to be a risk of severe weather. I think at least a slight risk for both days. Depending on where, we're not quite sure, but we will figure that out. And here's a nice graphic from the Storm Prediction Center. Hopefully you can read it pretty good. You probably can't read the towns and cities on this. Even I can't. They have it very, very tiny. But just a closer look and a better description on the percentages. The yellow, anywhere from a 15 to a 30% chance of severe weather. And the the orange here, that's a 30% chance or higher risk of severe weather. And it does mention, guys, the word outbreak isn't hype. A severe weather outbreak is possible on Monday. And I think it's possible for several days next week. All hazards are possible. Okay? So you may wonder, and some people, might get bored by this kind of stuff, but I love to re-explain it because I think in a way, and all people back this up. I think that this helps people that have that storm anxiety and that huge worry on storms and obviously, dangerous weather. When you know what drives it, when you understand it, I'm going to assume that probably helps a lot of people. Not everybody, but I'm going to assume it probably helps a lot of people. So that's what we're going to do. We're always going to do that. We do it during winter. We do it during severe weather season, and we do it during hurricane season. We like to explain what drives this stuff. So let's go on and move forward. We're going to take a look at just the Euro. So we're going to take it all the way to tomorrow afternoon. If you're wondering what the orange and red colors on this map are on this map, it's higher pressure. The bluer colors, that indicates lower pressure. Higher pressure typically associated with more stable, calmer conditions, all right? And this is at 500 millibars. So this is basically the pattern way above our heads, like 18,000 feet up in the air. But most of the time, the pattern that's going on above our heads is driving the pattern going on at the surface. Of course, sometimes you can have orange over you, for example, maybe in South Carolina. Not in this case particularly, but in South Carolina. And you could have below average temperatures. So there's many other very small things that go into this, but very detailed things. So let's not get too focused on that. So you notice this big blue blob on your screen moving into the west. That is a huge, you can call it many things. Area of low pressure. You can call it an upper trough, a trough of low pressure, an upper low. Same difference basically. Everything's about the same. You continue to move this forward here. We get into Sunday morning. Notice this is ticking further into the western U.S. Okay? And then we get into Sunday afternoon. Notice this is beginning to take that tilt, and we're going to explain that again, just like we have the last few videos. And then we get into Monday morning. This area of blue is basically really right over the Rockies, right? And then we get into Monday afternoon, which we know is really day one of what is going to be a very active stretch of weather next week. And you notice this blue area is right over the high plains, the Rockies, and this blue area, this lower pressure, always has a cold front associated with it. Sometimes it's weak, sometimes it's strong. And of course, a hurricane, a tropical system is a low pressure, but it doesn't have a cold front associated with it. So, some things are different, and I'm trying not to get off track here. Guys, I like to sometimes, but in this case, cold front associated with it. So that cold front acts to stabilize the atmosphere, but out ahead of this, This is bringing in the ingredients. So let's talk about what this upper trough means. So as you started off Sunday morning, notice this thing is kind of digging down like this, right? That is what we call a neutral tilt. There's a positive tilt too, and this thing is actually positively tilted before it really moves on shore. But it's really still way out into, you know, the northern Pacific. It has more of a positive tilt. It takes that neutral tilt as it starts to move into the western U.S., where it's digging straight down. Now you're starting to get into Sunday. This becomes negatively tilted. And let's take it all the way into Monday morning. Notice how suddenly this blue blob that you see on your screen is kind of bending out like this now. That is what we call negatively tilted. When these troughs go negatively tilted or eject, basically slingshot themselves across a landmass or an ocean or whatever it may be, they get very dynamic. They can get very dangerous. They bring very dynamic weather, whether it's in the winter, and it's just a crazy blizzard on the cold side and a severe weather event on the warmer side. And this happens a lot. But of course, we're getting into May. We're not going to see as much snow in May. And you can see this thing tilt, right? If you look right here, look how it tilts. Kind of vertical tilt, and then it begins to tilt to the right. Well, my right. Okay, and then this is when the weather gets wild. So next thing to talk about, what does this area of low pressure bring? I mean, what is it doing? Why is it bringing a severe weather event? Well, an area of low pressure brings unsettled weather, storms, if it's cold enough, snow, winter storms, just storm systems. So what happens is the flow around low pressure, and this particular low pressure is going like this. Okay? There's pieces of energy that get kind of slung around the base and the sides of this low pressure. And you can see this energy you see these little ripples right here and these isobars kind of going like this. That is actually energy slingshotting around this area of low pressure. So as energy does that, it basically acts as a lifting mechanism for a lot of widespread thunderstorms. And depending on the ingredients in place, you could get a severe weather outbreak. And in this case, it's most likely what's going to happen. So remember I talked about the flow kind of doing like this? Well, since that flow digs down right here and then shoots northward, this flow, southerly southwesterly flow, actually helps to pull up even more moist air that's already in place down here, but not so much up here. It actually pulls it up all the way just about into South Dakota. Okay, I think you'll have a severe weather risk all the way into South Dakota. So this is helping to pull in that rich, moist air from like Mexico, the Gulf of, and then the Gulf of Mexico. At the same time that it's doing that, it also has what we call a mid-level flow riding through here. So basically these are winds at 40, 50, 60, 70 knots, whatever it may be, riding down the base of this upper trough. And this flow in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, as it kind of rounds the base of this upper trough, basically slingshots over a very moist air mass. That flow is what we call kinematics, which is your favorable wind flow aloft, whether that's directional, speed, shear, low-level jets, mid-level jets. We really focus on that low-level flow when we get a little bit closer to these events. But so much moist air, which is a thermodynamic, sitting right here, this slingshots a favorable wind flow right over this area of moist air that's going to get pushed out ahead of this trough and slingshot northward, if you will. I hope that makes sense. Now, if you keep moving here and you look at what this trough does afterwards, we start to get into Tuesday morning. All of a sudden, this thing really broadens, and this is for Tuesday afternoon. Now, what I want you to notice now is this area that wasn't covered in blue, like right into here, is now covered in blue. For example, Monday, big time severe weather risk right into here, right? But now it's covered in blue. So you're thinking, what does that mean? Well, that means that you probably have had a cold front that's kind of moved through, dropped your dew points, lowered your moisture levels at the surface, and you probably have much more stable conditions. But now this trough has really kind of oozed its way into the Midwest. And notice, typically between what is still typically what is still like the orange, which is ridging in place right here, and the blue, which is low pressure, right here in between, this is where you get your severe weather. So once again, flow riding at the base, the southeast base, just around this trough and getting slung into this region, right? You see these little ripples right here? There's some energy right there. There's some energy kind of embedded right here that you can barely see. So the lifting mechanism is there because of that flow in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. And then this is once again helping to aid and pull a southwesterly flow of moist air. It basically just amplifies the moist air in place. And I keep saying that because there's already a lot of high-end humidity, low-level moisture in place before this upper trough even moves in and really enhances it across this region. Okay, so that's Tuesday, and then you get into Wednesday. Same deal, but it gets a little bit weirder. Okay, this trough on the Euro kind of extends to this trough in eastern Canada, but it's the same general thing. You still got this flow going like this and riding up through here. Okay, and this is still yanking in a lot of moist air right up into here, which is why for Wednesday you had that severe weather threat more so right into here. But everybody, there's going to be some sort of boundary right into here, separating very moist air, I'm going to draw everywhere, very moist air down here, and more stable air up here, which is not going to support severe weather. Okay, so the trough gets strung out, weakened somewhat, and the details get much more fuzzy as we get into Wednesday. And then we get into Thursday, it gets even more odd, okay? But you still have this huge area of blue over the country that's still influencing the pattern at the surface. So you're probably still going to have a lot of moist air into here and a lot of flow moving just like that. So are you going to get a severe weather threat still down here in Texas? Maybe the deep south, the mid-south, the Ohio Valley? It's very possible. What kind of energy is getting slung kind of around this area of low pressure? And then, I mean, we'll take it all the way to Friday, guys. Friday, look how this trough really starts to dig down. And I think that this is eventually going to get re-amplified over the eastern U.S. and actually bring maybe a cold front and cool us down next weekend. But it's the same thing. You know, you get into Friday, I mean, it really gets more stable up here in the Midwest. Your severe weather threat really shuts down up into here. And then we got to watch the south as we have a lot of flow moving across this region. Okay? And you're definitely being more influenced by that mid-level jet. Okay? So I know I spent an astronomical amount of time on that. Just have a little bit more time this evening to really dive deep into it. Let's actually show what this looks like as far as kinematics. You know, because I was just doing nothing but drawing on that screen. But let's show you what it looks like as far as your kinematics and your thermodynamics. Of course, first, we'll switch it up. We'll look at the kinematics first. So this is your mid-level flow. Winds 500 millibars in the atmosphere at 18, 19, 17,000 feet. This is our system moving in. This is that upper trough. Remember how I was saying, if you tuned in from the last graphic, that there's going to be a flow at the base of the trough? There's your flow. This is your trough right into here, right? That's your trough. There is your flow. Here, let's draw this again. If you hear my kids in the background, I have kids. It's Friday night, and you know I'm not going to tell them not to be quiet while I make a video. You know, I'm not going to. I love my kids, and I want them to have fun. Most people who are tuning in know I have kids and know that. You know, I'm a big kid myself. So, anyways, let's not get too far off track. There's a flow going at the base of this trough just like this. That's your exit region right into here. This is going to provide a lifting mechanism for thunderstorms. But of course, right into here, you're right over the Rockies, stable air. You know, you're not really going to get it. Okay, but you keep this going. All right, let's go on and get into that big day, which is Monday. If we can get this in motion, come on. We get into this big day, which is Monday. Here comes all that mid-level flow. We start to get into Monday afternoon, 21Z. Let's just call it Monday afternoon. Look at all this flow. Now, the Euro looks weird. It does, and it's hard to explain to you guys what I mean by weird, but it just looks different. We have to see if something switches with the Euro overnight. But in general, upper trough, negatively tilted right into here. Flow, just like we talked about, riding all the way and pivoting all the way back into the Dakotas. This is helping to pull in that moist air also along with that flow. What do you get? You get overlapping thermodynamics and kinematics. There's that flow. This is providing that lifting mechanism for thunderstorm development and providing wind energy for tornado development and damaging winds, and of course, with your high levels of CAPE, large hail too. Okay, get this off your screen. Let's just go on and fast forward to this. Fast forward this, can't talk, to your Tuesday afternoon. I've had a lot of people ask about Ohio, the Ohio Valley. Well, Ohio, you notice how you have a lot of weak flow, 20, 30 knots. Just to your west in Indiana, Illinois, much more potent flow aloft in the mid-levels, okay? Low levels will be there too. We just got to figure out where these individual surface lows are. It looks like there's one right into here developing, still one way up into here. So a lot of flow going on, kinematic energy. Where is your highest surface moisture going to be? Probably all right here at the bottom base of this flow. But there's that mid-level flow flying over. You got this, in some cases, 80 knot mid-level jet. But it's kind of the bottom edge of this mid-level flow right down here, where you have better moisture levels. That's probably where you're going to have your highest severe weather threat. And of course, you're going to have severe weather right all up into here. And, Iowa might get a break because maybe sometime overnight, Monday into Tuesday, the cold front clears in a very favorable time of the day for less severe weather. So we just got to figure that one out. Maybe not. But there's the flow riding over a very moist air mass, right? And then we start to get into our Wednesday. And watch how this changes. And I wish that I could do this much slower, but pivotal weather is very finicky, guys. And if you actually have the tab up for too long, it just gets very, very slow. And if I tried to pull up all these tabs on the fly, these videos would last like 2 hours. It's ridiculous. But a lot of flow getting strung out over the central and southern plains all the way into the Midwest. A belt of like 50 to 65 knot mid-level flow. I mean, all the way into the Northeast. But I want you to note, upper trough strung out over this region area of low pressure. So, there's probably going to be an area, I don't know, somewhere in here that's probably going to have a lot of stable air. Okay, because your cold front is probably kind of draped across this region right here. So you got much more stable air up here, where you still have very moist air right into here, and maybe all the way up into here, we'll have to see. And you still got this flow right into here. That's where your most severe weather is probably going to be for Wednesday. And that's why you have the highest threat of severe weather as of right now, right into here. Favorable flow, probably your most deep, richest moisture. Probably not as deep up here because the cold front kind of moves in, stabilizes the air mass. And of course, in the southeast, you do got a lot of moist air, but you don't have a lot of flow. It's all over here. Okay? Hope that makes sense. And we will kind of dive into our Thursday also. But Thursday gets, definitely different. We still got a lot to figure out about Thursday. This is Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening. Notice the mid-level flow really kind of gets shunted down to the deep south. Where's the cold front? Where's the stable dry air? A lot of flow over this area, but that doesn't mean you have supportive dew points. Okay? So speaking of the dew points, what I can tell you is Sunday afternoon, you already have an extremely moist air mass just parking up over the south central U.S., dew points in the 60s and 70s. If you don't know what that means, that's very humid air. I always say this. I like to throw this in here sometimes. If you're really trying to figure out how humid it is outside, please stop looking at the humidity percentage, guys. And I want to geek out on some people when they say, yeah, man, it's really humid outside. The humidity percentage is 95%, but then the dew point is like 52. And a dew point in the low 50s is actually pretty comfortable. So just know that you can wake up with a humidity percentage of like 99% on your Weather Channel app, but your dew point might be like 50. So, it's not very humid. There's just a lot of moisture in the atmosphere, but that doesn't mean that it's super humid. And I know that's very confusing. I actually made a video about that several years back, one of my first like 50 videos I've ever made. But I explained the difference between dew points and relative humidity and what it means and how you should gauge humidity off that. So always look at dew points. If dew points are in the 60s and 70s, just know it's humid outside. And typically the more humid it is outside, the more juice is in the atmosphere for thunderstorm development. And you certainly got that. I've been going off track big time in this video, and I do apologize for the people who hate that. You guys know how I am. But, you know, we get into Wednesday afternoon. This is what I'm talking about how you get this kind of pool of low-level moisture all the way up into South Dakota, dew points in the 60s. You notice how it's kind of like a tongue right all the way up into the Dakotas? That is because this trough gets negatively tilted, and you remember you got that flow that goes around this trough right all the way up into here. Okay? Trough negatively tilted, just like we talked about like 80 minutes ago earlier in the video. It's a long one, I know. But this is actually helping to pull that low-level moisture temporarily all the way up here to like the U.S.-Canadian line. This is why you got that severe weather threat more so right into here where you have your best lift, your best moisture at the surface. Right into here. Okay? But look as you start to get into Tuesday afternoon. Just going fast all the way forward here. Tuesday afternoon. Notice this entire area that had that deep, rich moisture, like in the 60s all the way up to South Dakota. Now you have dew points in like the 30s and 40s. That's not going to get the job done as far as severe weather. And all your moist air is back over here into like Illinois, Indiana areas, the Midwest. And of course, you got rich, deep, tropical moisture down here in Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi. Okay? So you still got a flow over this very dry air, but you don't have your thermodynamics anymore. You don't have that rich low-level moisture. All that is now over here. It's been over here, but now your flow has shifted to the east. So your flow is kind of going over like this, right over this very rich, moist air mass. So even though you still got that flow here, dry air. Flow over here, over moist air, overlapping conditions, right? Hope that makes sense. You get into Wednesday, and this is what I'm talking about Wednesday. About, yeah, you know, you still got a very solid flow all the way up here into the Ohio Valley, which is what we just discussed, right? But the big thing we got to figure out is where is there going to be a cold front? There's going to be a cold front somewhere like into here, right? It's going to be kind of buckled because of just different areas of the trough being amplified, if that makes sense. All right, so dry air pushing down, lower dew points, of course. You got the really low dew points out here west because higher elevation. But dew points, I mean, if you look right into here, like in northern Indiana, northern Ohio, northern Illinois, Iowa, dew points are in the 40s and 50s. But then if you look in the southern portions of those states, into Missouri, the Ohio River Valley, the Mid-South, dew points well into the 60s and 70s. That's going to get the job done for severe weather. And of course, you still got the flow riding right over this region right here. Okay? But your deepest moisture is right in here, and you still have a solid flow, mid-level flow going right over this region, right over this extremely tropical air mass for early May standards here in the south central U.S. Okay, and then there goes the evening train outside of my house that I can hear, and then you start to get into your Thursday afternoon, evening, and you notice it just gets weird. We got to figure out what that boundary is. You see where the boundary is right into here? There's a boundary right into here separating very moist air and not so moist air. So where's the flow going to be? It'll most likely for Thursday still be probably into this region right here. So you're probably going to run a significant severe weather risk Thursday across the Ohio River Valley, Kentucky, Tennessee, maybe into southern Ohio, southern Indiana, across the same similar areas in the southern plains, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi. And then we get into Friday, and, you know, I really do think we're going to have probably some sort of severe weather day, maybe Friday for the southeast, maybe Saturday, depending on how quick the cold front moves in. As soon as that cold front kind of gets close, this provides that lifting mechanism for storms. Okay, kind of like what's going to happen in Texas tomorrow. So one of the last things we'll look at is in response. This is a thermodynamic 2, your storm fuel. All right, in response to your favorable dew points, you're going to have favorable CAPE levels. So you notice you get that tongue of low-level moisture all the way up into South Dakota. Therefore, you get a little storm fuel, a little cape. It doesn't quite, it might, but you got a little pocket of maybe almost 1,000 joules per kilogram here in the Dakotas. But of course, it escalates quickly as we get down here into southeastern Nebraska. We get into Kansas, we get into Oklahoma. You start to get rocket fuel. And we get that flow riding right over all this storm fuel, this cape, mixed layer cape, that's well into the thousands as far as the readings. Even deeper storm energy down here. But are you going to have the lift down here? You're going to have better lift here for thunderstorm development. Your best overlapping ingredients here. Okay? And then, of course, we look at Tuesday afternoon. A lot of storm fuel, right? This is ample amount of fuel for Illinois, Indiana. Cape levels 1,000, 2,000 joules per kilogram. Notice there's a sharp cutoff right in here into northern, northeastern Ohio, lower Michigan. But you have a lot of fuel. Over 1,000 is enough if you have enough flow aloft. In southern and southwestern Ohio, of course, the further south and southwest you work, the more fuel in the atmosphere you have, the higher cape levels, storm fuel. And I mean, you got rocket fuel down here in Texas, but are you going to get any storm development? And then you make your way into Wednesday afternoon, and you have a massive amount of storm fuel in the atmosphere in Arkansas, southeastern, eastern Oklahoma, and eastern, the entire eastern half of Texas. But you notice you're starting to get some higher cape levels into the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky. So the severe weather threat for the southeast, which has really took a back seat to really any kind of active weather over the last, well, entire 2024 so far, besides like one isolated like catastrophic hailstorm in York County in upstate South Carolina. But we didn't have any kind of winter. We haven't had much of a severe weather season. It's just been quiet. We've really been lucky. But, you know, you got to watch Thursday and you got to watch Friday down here. I'm not going to get too specific on Thursday and Friday of next week until we just get a little bit closer. But as far as what the radar could look like, we have no idea, but I will show it to some people just to look at. I think the Euro has a pretty decent idea of what could happen. You know, you got a surface low somewhere up here in the northern plains. Look at all these storms developing. You could have storms down to Texas too. All these storms right over the middle of the plains developing. Look, I mean, it could be a very stormy afternoon, Monday afternoon for like the southeast too. I just think you're lacking ingredients for severe weather. And then you get into Tuesday afternoon, you're going to have some storms probably up here in the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes region, but I don't think way up here up north you're going to, I don't know if you're going to have severe weather because you don't really have that higher moisture at the surface. So I think Tuesday could be a weird day. Are we going to have some sort of surface low into here, weak surface low, that's going to promote more storms in this area? Notice the surface low is way over here associated with this upper low. Okay? Got the surface low and an upper low. So we're going to have some sort of other energy right in here develop. We still got to figure that one out. But confidence is there enough to put that risk of severe weather for Tuesday. Now, if you watch what happens after this, you start to get into Wednesday morning. Look at another low pressure developing down here in Oklahoma and the southern plains. And that's not good. I think Wednesday could be a big day if something like the Euro happens. You got a sub 1,000 millibar low pressure developing over Oklahoma. You got storms out ahead of it. You got storms that most likely are going to form to the east and southeast of it. So we got some storms showing up for southern New England too. You got to watch that. But it's definitely a lot of things to watch here. And I'm running out of gas with this video. I'm not going to lie. But you know, you get into Thursday evening, Thursday afternoon, a lot of storms, surface low right into here. It gets kind of weird when we get into Thursday. We got a lot to figure out. So hope that video makes sense. That's all I got. We'll probably do it again tomorrow morning. God bless all y'all. Stay safe out there. And I'll talk to you again in the morning. God bless.